What is going on, all you awesome superhero aficionados? This is the Heroes and Mutants podcast. I'm Nick with my co-host
James.
And Eric. Hey, guys.
So, obvious, if you guys didn't know, today is actually, well, you guys won't know because we're going to post it a little bit later. But on the day that we're recording this episode is the 1-year anniversary of the death of Chadwick Boseman. Obviously, why I'm wearing my Black Panther shirt. So, crazy to think. And I remember, too, Eric wasn't a part of this, but last year when we filmed on the day that he died, we actually filmed on the day he died. And after, literally 5-10 minutes after we got done filming, I remember I was probably about 2 blocks away from the recording studio, and I got an update on my phone just in Chadwick Boseman passes away at the age of 43. And I was like, this can't be real. Like, there's no way that this is real. And I remember, I think he even called Jimmy. I was like, bro, did you see that update? He's like, yeah, dude.
I'm the one who sent it to you.
Yeah.
I'm the one
that was so crazy.
To you, man. Yeah, but we got it announced like 10 minutes. The announcement came like 10 minutes after we wrapped Heroes and Mutants pod.
It's so crazy, man. It's to fall back and think that that's already been a year and that he's been gone a year already. It's just so crazy. But
I can't believe it's been a year. That went by really, really, really fast.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
But Chadwick Boseman, your legacy lives on forever. You are one and only true king. We miss you dearly. You Bombay. So with all that being said, we're going to get into the updates, and there's a bunch of new stuff that came out and a bunch of things that we had a firsthand look at. So without a doubt, the biggest thing that happened was we finally got the trailer for No Way Home. There was a lot of fan favorite moments and a lot of crazy and a lot of stuff that really we were able to figure out, and a lot of rumors turned out to be true. So what did you guys think first off from the trailer?
I thought it was crazy. I thought it was awesome. And you did see, I mean, what was it, like a few days before it started leaking online and everyone was talking about it, and it was so dumb. It was like I saw like a clip of the leak, and I was like, I'm not gonna watch this. I'm gonna wait for the actual trailer, because it was like some dude on their phone and they're recording it with another phone, and you can barely see it, you can barely hear it, but it was actually the leaked trailer. So a lot of people got to see it before it officially came out, but even then, it came out, and there's just so much to unpack in that one trailer, just because it came out so late for a movie that's coming out in December. It's like just coming out now. And people have been asking for it for months now, right? And so I'm really excited about it. I think that, like I said, there's a lot to unpack from that one trailer. It's really cool.
I mean, obviously, people were eager for it because, I mean, it broke the 24 all-time record with 355.5 million views.
In less
worldwide
than 24 hours.
That's crazy. In 24 hours, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jimmy, overall?
I'm pretty excited. I think that they're holding it late because I think they want to concentrate all the hype leading up to the film, kind of concentrated into that one short period of time, so it doesn't wane over a year, so it doesn't like fade off. Yeah. I'm pretty excited. I don't know what to think because I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, as a fanboy, I'm actually really excited to see Alfred Molina return as Doc Ock. It's hard not to like get a little bit like it's hard not to smile when you first see Alfred Molina return and he says hi, Peter. I don't know what to think of this yet. I'm pretty excited for this movie, but I just hope that they do the Spider-Verse justice in this. I don't. Okay. So in that trailer, is Doc Ock talking to Peter? Because I keep hearing a lot of speculation that he's talking to the Peter Parker from his universe, not Tom Holland's Peter Parker.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beauties that they have when they. Advantage that they have at their disposal when they cut up trailers. They're able to just pick and choose and cut around whatever they want to throw in there, and a lot of it can just be up to spectacle, or a lot of it can be very deceptive on what has actually happened or what's going to happen in the movie.
Yeah, if you think about the trailer for, I don't know, years ago, but for Avengers Infinity War, you saw Hulk in the trailers throughout the whole, like everything leading up to it. But
because you get to the actual final shot, he was running in the background. So
they have multiple scenes that show the Hulk in the movie. But once you get to it, you really just get Bruce Banner most of it.
Yeah.
So obviously they can do whatever they want with these trailers. Something really interesting that I saw pointed out was that on that scene, so you see Doc Ock, he's like on a bridge. You see the Green Goblin throw his bomb, and you
Oh,
hear, yeah, you hear who it is, right? And it's awesome to see that they're bringing back the original Green Goblin from Spider-Man, also from the original Spider-Man series. But if you look at Tom Holland, what he's wearing, he's actually wearing the exact same suits that Tobey Maguire was wearing in Spider-Man 2 at the end of the film.
yeah.
So he's wearing the dark blue, light blue shirt and the exact same tie when he's standing on the car on the bridge. So what a lot of people are thinking is they might have like either deep faked Tom Holland's face onto Tobey Maguire's body for that specific scene, because it's already been confirmed that the Doc Ock that we get on that bridge is right before he dies in Spider-Man 2. And Molina said that in an interview. So he said it's the same Doc Ock. So because of that, people are like, oh, maybe it's like, maybe because of what Doctor Strange had done, what we see happen in the trailer, maybe Tom Holland's like consciousness is pushed into him. Maybe again, they're just messing with us with a trailer, and it's actually going to be Tobey Maguire on that bridge, not Tom Holland.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, so it's all kinds of like crazy stuff, and I also thought about that deep fake stuff because they Disney and Marvel recently hired one of the like top deep fake YouTubers from YouTube. Yeah, the one that had done like
the Luke Skywalker, that one.
Yeah, that guy. The guy
interesting.
Imprinted Luke Skywalker onto the faces, and he did a bunch of Marvel ones also. That same guy, Marvel hired him a couple months back. So everyone's like, oh, they have to be doing something with him if they're actually using his talents for Marvel. So I was thinking along those lines too, like they can be doing that. And then when you think about Doctor Strange, a lot of people are saying he's acting out of character.
Yeah, so a lot of people were speculating that he's actually Mephisto.
Again with the Mephisto. That has to be like a meme by now, right?
I know, it's like, well, Wanda, I'm not going to lie, for WandaVision, I totally thought Mephisto was going to be the one pulling the strings, especially because we knew it was going to be about Agatha Harkness and that she was going to be, we thought she was going to be working covertly for Mephisto like she had done in the comics.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing in that, the way that it looks in that trailer, that he would cast such a risky spell.
Really?
Maybe I don't know. Not just that.
At least the way the trailer presents it is it didn't take much for him to do it. Like he was just like, okay, can you please undo everybody knowing that I'm Spider-Man? He was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. At least that's the way the trailer presents it. There might be some pushback when we actually have it, and he might go deeper into being like, this is costing my family, this is costing my friends. I don't want to put them in harm's way. I don't want people to know that I'm Spider-Man anymore. So like, maybe there's going to be more context to that scene.
Mm-hmm.
But also too, things look kind of weird. It's like, the Sanctum looks like Narnia.
Yeah, it's all frozen over.
Yeah, it looks a little weird. And then I think the funniest thing I noted, like, it was just kind of funny how he didn't even try to like dress up. He just threw the
sweater,
the cloak of levitation over like over his regular clothes.
Yeah. I don't think this is out of character for Doctor Strange, honestly. I think
in a way it does, but in a way it doesn't, because he's kind of been like that before. Even though I think once he got into that role of Doctor Strange, taking over the Sanctum, he did kind of become more stern, and he kind of was more someone who didn't really mess around that much.
I don't know. I think he kept his cockiness, and he's still pretty like destructive, because even at the end of the Doctor Strange movie, like what he did to Dormammu, he's using the time stone how he's not supposed to be using it. That's what makes Mordor leave in the end, right?
Yeah,
because he's playing God, and
going against the natural order.
Yeah, and throughout Infinity War and Endgame, it's the same thing. He's like super like strict. He's like, all right, no, I'm the time stone above everyone's lives. I don't care about you guys. Like, if it comes between Iron Man, Spider-Man, the Time Stone, I'm saving the Time Stone. Like, that's always how he's been. And so I don't think his character has actually developed like in the same way that like Tony Stark's did, right? Where he actually started caring for the other people. And I think this trailer is very like it's him. I think it's in line with who we've seen so far. where he's like, oh, you know what? That sounds like a cool spell. I can do it. I'm Doctor Strange. Like I'm gonna do this. So I think that's why I'm kind of going away from the Mephisto theory again.
Yeah.
But because we start
Yeah,
hearing
that more
Mephisto
so
theories,
because at this point it's become incredibly played out. So I don't
right?
think
I
that's
don't
what
think
it's
it's
gonna be. But
Mephisto. I don't
Yeah,
think it's Mephisto.
no,
I think that
but
people who want it to be are just reaching for it at this point.
yeah,
yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just that Peter wouldn't shut up during the entire spell from what I've seen.
yeah,
Do you think Doctor Strange would have at least, I mean, he did tell him, but would have at least stopped. He's like, listen, kid, I'm not going to cast this spell until you know for sure what you want to do. It was weird that he keeps casting it in the middle of
yeah.
I
Peter.
think he was already in the middle of it. Like, or maybe it seems like it's one of those things. Like once he starts, he can't
You
exactly
can't
stop.
stop. Yeah,
Yeah.
They're messing with the fabric of reality and time. So obviously he wouldn't like really stop and be like, wait, hold on. We gotta, what do you want to do exactly?
yeah,
So
So
Tom Holland tweeted out, I don't know his tweet. It said on social media that this is like you haven't seen anything yet. Do you guys think
oh yeah, it was in his story, an
yeah, I
Instagram
mean,
story.
he's known for ruining things in the Marvel universe, but I mean, he's actually done a good job of keeping a lid on this. Do you think it's going to lead to Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire? Do you think that's what he's suggesting? He's saying we're only seeing basically the tip of the iceberg.
I think so.
Yeah,
It's what everybody really wants to see, honestly. And
I think they're
I
just
think
gonna
we'll
give it
see.
that they want to see.
I think we'll at least see Tobey Maguire,
yeah,
just because Sam Raimi's been doing the Doctor Strange movie, and he has a good relationship with Tobey Maguire. And I don't know about having Andrew Garfield in there. He might not show up. But I think it's a safe bet to say
But
Tobey
Jamie
Maguire's going
Foxx's
to show up.
Electro is supposed to be a part of this too.
I know.
So that gives me so if all right, if it were just Raimi-verse villains, I would not be speculating about Andrew Garfield. But the fact that they're dipping into that too, makes me think that
and possibly the Lizard too.
and the Lizard, yeah, I'm like, so they're not just dipping
Yeah.
into the Raimi-verse. That's why I
Yeah.
think Andrew Garfield will be a
I
part.
think the
Everyone
thing
was
that
saying
was-
the Lizard. I actually thought it was Scorpion, maybe, because we see Scorpion at the end of Spider-Man: Homecoming with the
Yeah.
Vulture. So I think we're getting the Sinister Six.
Yeah, that's the thing that was kind of. It seems like they're gonna be hinting at a multiverse Sinister Six.
Yeah,
Is what it looks like.
yeah, that's what I think
Pretty
too.
cool.
Obviously, we're not going to get all the same.
Of
The
course, not.
original Sinister Six. They're going to have their own version, but
Either way,
overall, yeah.
it's cool because it's new territory for comic book films to actually be. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
for live action anyway. For live action,
Definitely.
comic book media to be delving into the multiverse aspect, and it's the first time we're going to see. Past universes of different reboots of superheroes all come together as one, which is something we probably never thought of as kids. We figured like once Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is done, it's done. Once Michael Keaton's Batman's done, it's done. We're living in a world where it's all canon now. All of it could still be canon, and all of it could be true.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, we did see in WandaVision when I forgot the actor's name, when he comes back as Quicksilver. I think that was like the first taste we got of it, but of course everyone blew up, right?
Yeah.
Like all social media and everything. So you can only imagine what's gonna happen here if they have any type of cameo, even outside of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. If we get any type of cameo from past Marvel movies, it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Also,
so still a lot that we don't know about No Way Home. Hopefully we'll at least get a hint of like Toby standing there with Tom, like shaking hands, being like, hey, I'm Peter Parker from Earth, whatever. And that's going to be awesome. I'm super excited. It's so crazy to think this movie only comes out in like 3 months. But yeah, when other news hits, we'll be the first to report on it. So stay tuned for that. And another big thing that dropped recently too was there was a trailer reveal for Marvel's Midnight Suns RPG video game coming March 2022. Which I was super pumped about and super excited. Apparently, it's going to be published by Fire Axis Games, and it's actually it's going to take some of its inspiration from the original Midnight Suns run, but the way that they structure the team is actually going to be a bit of a mashup between Midnight Suns, Avengers, X-Men, and Runaways. So the playable characters are going to be, or the playable roster is going to be Iron Man, Cap, Wolverine, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, Blade, Ghost Rider, Magic, Elena Rasputin, which is Colossus's sister, and Nico Minoru from the Runaways.
The Runaways.
So What did you guys think of this trailer reveal?
It looks.
We'll go with Eric first. Eric is the
Eric is the
game
video
gamer.
game guy. I'm not a big video game guy.
So I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't know if you guys know,
Definitely.
but the Marvel's Avengers game that just came out,
God,
year, it bombed, and it was made by Square Enix. So they've made Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, all these awesome games, and it didn't work out with Marvel's Avengers. Me as a comic book fan, I really liked that game. I really liked that story, but the way it plays out with other people online, it's just really wonky. There's a lot of glitching, and it's just kind of overall just messed up. The DLC is really cool, and they have like a Hawkeye DLC. They had a Kate Bishop Hawkeye DLC, and now the Black Panther DLC, and all those new stories and playing through the story mode is really cool. It's really nostalgic if you've read the comic books. Even if you watch the movies, it's really fun. But overall, it bombed. Like, it came out as a $60 game. At 3 months, it was down to $40. By this time now, PlayStation and Xbox are including them in their passes for free.
wow.
So, and they're just trying to get anyone to play them. And so it's really messed up. So that's why I say I'm cautiously optimistic, because when this game was announced, it's not being published by Square Enix. The people that are publishing it actually did the XCOM series, which are like turn-based shooters and strategy games. So XCOM 1, XCOM 2, they're really big. They're like cult classics for a lot of people who will still play them even though they came out 10, 15 years ago. And those games play really well as RPGs and as strategy games. So if they're bringing in these Marvel characters in a strategy game format, they're definitely the developers to do that. And I think it'll be really cool to see what they do with it. Right. Just because with Marvel's Avengers and Square Enix, it was kind of out of their realm. They were trying to do something with the Marvel characters that it's like, oh, if you change, like, Cap's shield, is going to affect the strength and it's going to affect different things. Whereas it makes more sense as an RPG with Midnight Suns. And for that reason, I think I'm going to get it regardless. I think it looks really fun. It's a storyline that not a lot of people know from the comic books, but it brings together a lot of like mystical heroes, and I love seeing Nico in there. Nico's one of my favorite like magical heroes, just because with her staff she can only cast a specific spell once. She can't cast the same spell more than once, and I think that just adds for creativity, and I want to see how that plays out in the game. But overall, I think it'll be really cool to see her with I think both there was two Ghost Riders, right? Midnight Suns. It was Johnny Blaze and
Johnny Blaze and Danny Ketch were both kind of like founding members in a way, but the Ghost Rider they're doing here is Robbie Reyes, obviously. Yeah,
you can tell. So I think I'm optimistic for the game. I'm gonna get it anyway. I'm gonna play it.
Definitely,
me
too.
I think it's gonna be fun.
It seems like it's gonna be a more of a comic accurate video game than like the Avengers game was with Square Enix.
Yeah,
and it just feels like very kind of reminiscent of a Ultimate Alliance kind of game. At least the look and feel of what they're going with. Yeah. The only thing I already knew this was going to be, but Blade and Ghost Rider are technically, or Doctor Strange, you can pretty much say he was responsible for bringing the Midnight Suns together and didn't exactly join as an actual member until a little bit later. But Ghost Rider and Blade are technically like the only members of the original run of the Midnight Suns. So and the whole, that's why I said it was a mix-up of like the Avengers, Runaways, and the Midnight Suns and X-Men. So it feels like I like what they're going with, and I think it makes sense from a branding perspective. You need to throw Iron Man in there. You need to throw Cap in there. You need to throw Wolverine in there. Aside, I think Ghost Rider would probably be the most, or Blade would probably also be, they're actually very well-known members, but I feel like as far as capturing people's attention and making them want to play this game from just a casual audience perspective. So I think that was a smart idea. And then at that ending trailer when they're all just walking to the melody, that it was really cool. I thought the trailer did with a cover of Enter Sandman. And it played on that melody, and they were all just doing that slow motion, badass, gratuitous walk that has become a trope of every kind of comic adaptation in pop culture. And they all had like matching uniforms with the gold and black. I thought that was really cool to see, and that instantly just got me hyped for it.
Yeah, It looks really good, but I have to admit, I have to be honest, I phased out video games the last 5-6 years of my life. I don't have any current consoles or keep up with it, mostly because I actually really love video games, but they're addicting, and I have enough expensive habits and time-consuming things on my plate right now. So video games are a little bit hard for me to handle at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it looks cool. I guess
I love
they're
video
gonna
games, though. I can't keep up with it.
Yeah, I just hope that they stick to the comic books and bring up those stories. That's what helped Ultimate Alliance do really well.
Yeah,
And
I think that's kind of what they're going with, because it's going to be based around them combating Lilith, Lilith, the demon mother, and that's exactly how the Midnight Suns form. So it feels like they're going to be kind of going more that route, maybe just doing their own kind of interpretation and sprinkle in common characters that the public would know.
Yeah.
So I think this looks really cool.
Yeah.
We'll wait till we see a gameplay trailer that I think is going to drop on Monday, and we'll let you guys know. But it looks pretty cool from what we got so far. Speaking of Midnight Suns, it's actually been revealed in the last couple days, that Marvel Studios is searching for a Latino actor to lead an Untitled Disney Plus Halloween special, and that it's apparently going to be based on Werewolf by Night, who was also a member of the Midnight Suns, and that it's supposed to begin filming in early 2022. So I feel like that's a good way for them to segue into something a little bit different and kind of touch more on those paranormal aspects and that monster movie, on how would the Marvel Studios integrate something like that. So I think that's very cool. We don't know for sure, but that they're hinting it, and it would make sense if they're looking for a Halloween special, it'd be Werewolf by Night. So hopefully that's the case, but we'll report on it as that develops further. And moving on from that, there's a lot of confusion going on with Venom 3, in that it possibly is going to be getting delayed till January 2022, supposedly taking Morbius's release date, but there was a report that came out by Vulture saying that that wasn't true, that they're still planned to release with their October deadline, but it's already been delayed. I think it's out of the realm of possibility that it could be delayed again. So it's just kind of weird what's going on with Venom 3. As of right now, it's still supposed to be scheduled for October, but a report is saying that it's going to be pushed back to January. So we'll let you guys know as that happens. As of right now, that's what's still going on, but there's so much confusion going on with this movie, I swear. And also, it's been revealed that a Black Canary film is in development to be released on HBO Max, with Journey Smollett reprising her role from Birds of Prey and Misha Green writing the script. So that seems like it's going to be pretty cool. Obviously, DC and Warner Brothers, they really trying to do more with their HBO Max stuff, with exclusive stuff. Obviously, there's we got Blue Beetle, we got Batgirl, and all the other shows that they're working on. So, say that again.
Peacemaker, the two Peacemakers.
Peacemaker! I forgot about that. So, I think she was a really cool addition to Birds of Prey and was a pretty cool Black Canary. So, I'd like to see more with what they do. And also, obviously, this isn't anything we didn't know. We were pretty much had an idea that this was going to happen, but Anthony Mackie officially closes a deal to reprise his role in a Captain America solo film. I think he's earned that and paid his dues, and it's really cool to see what's gonna happen next and what journey they're gonna take with this Captain America.
I'm actually surprised that wasn't closed sooner. I know. Surprised. I thought they had already agreed to that when we got to the end of Falcon and Winter Soldier, or Captain America Winter Soldier. So I was surprised to see that. I was like, hold up, he wasn't already signed up to be Captain America in the new film?
They were probably waiting to see how people reacted or how audiences and fans reacted, and it seems to be pretty positive for the most part. So
that's true. That makes sense.
Safe.
Yeah. I kind of thought maybe it would just mean that they were going to do a second season called Captain America and the Winter Soldier.
I don't think
that's kind of, but yeah, it seems like that show. That show ended, like 3-4 months ago? So it is kind of weird that like 3-4 months later, we finally get official confirmation that he's going to be Captain America in the new Captain America film.
Yeah.
And also, moving on for that, we also just got word that Ironheart, played by Dominique Thorne, will make her cinematic debut in Wakanda Forever, which has just started filming. So that's another thing that we're eagerly waiting for and excited. And also, we haven't touched on this, but there's been 3 episodes now of What If, and we haven't covered the last 2. So what did you guys think about the last 2 episodes?
We can unpack one at a time, I guess.
We'll talk about the one where in the second episode where T'Challa actually became Star Lord, and that was obviously Chadwick Boseman's final performance as T'Challa. So rest in peace again, Chadwick Boseman. What did you guys think about it?
I'm enjoying it, but out of like the 4 series that have come on for the MCU on Disney Plus, it's probably my least favorite, and I was sharing that with Eric before. And even if you include MODOK, which would be 5 shows, which on Hulu, it still would be my least favorite of them. It was good. It just, I feel like they could have done more with some of these storylines, and they're interesting, but they don't feel very important sometimes. Sometimes they feel just like throwaway stories that you can I don't know, you can take them or leave them. I'm enjoying it, but it's not, I don't think it's fulfilling its potential. I think it could be a better show.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I watch the show, I almost feel like I'm watching like the my son's like children Marvel shows, because he watches like Spider-Man and all the other shows that are like directed to children, or even like the Rising ones that have like Squirrel Girl and Miss Marvel and all that. It kind of feels like those shows. It's just like one-off stories, and yeah, they got the original actors for the most part to come and reprise their role. Yeah, but at the same time, it's just like it almost feels like a waste of using their voice and their character to not make it part of the greater like MCU. And who knows? We still don't know technically if it's part of the MCU now, with like multiple realities crossing over, and especially at the end of Loki with the multiverse. But even then, it just feels like, okay, cool story, moving on.
It just feels like passing the time series for Marvel, like
filler. You mean
like almost like filler? I'm like, I don't want to say it's that, because it's kind of enjoyable and it's amusing, but it just I don't think the show is fulfilling its potential as alternate universe storylines or what if. I don't think they go far enough. The T'Challa one, a Star-Lord one, was fine, but I don't know. I felt like they could have done a little bit more with it. Same with the recent one. Just a side note, I don't know if you noticed, but the voice of Natasha is Poison Ivy from the Harley Quinn series.
Oh,
because I don't think Scarlett Johansson and Disney are getting along very well right now. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's enjoyable. It's good. It's just, it's the least I've been impressed with a lot of Marvel stuff in a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting that they put out, like, the very first episode was Captain Carter, and then it was T'Challa as Star-Lord, because I feel like those were the 2 most anticipated storylines from this whole series.
Yeah,
at least for myself and for like everyone that I've talked to, they're like, oh, T'Challa Star-Lord, and oh, we got Agent Carter as Captain America, and that was it. And now I'm just like, I don't even remember from the trailers what other storylines there were.
I think just because of that whole thing, they were building up to Chadwick Boseman because this was going to be his final performance as T'Challa. That only made sense. But aside from that, I couldn't even remember. Same thing too with what were the other episodes. It was more, I was kind of not exactly wanting to know and kind of just going into it blindfolded, being like, okay, what is today's episode going to be about, or what direction are they going to take?
I feel
whatever storyline we knew before.
I feel like there's no way not to be let down a little bit with the T'Challa. And it's not just because it's not that great. It's there's another layer of what's going on right there, is that it's the last performance of Chadwick Boseman. But we have to remember, when they were filming this, they were not designing this to be the send off for that character or to be the farewell for Chadwick Boseman, and it has to serve as that. And it just doesn't really cut it in terms of being like a good send off for the character. But that's not even really a fair complaint, because I don't think that's what they had in mind when they were filming that when they were making that episode anyway.
I think with that said, I'm kind of going along the same lines as Jimmy, where like, they're good stories and like I'm enjoying them, but at the same time, it just feels like lackluster when you have the greater whole Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Especially with Loki that just came out. Like yeah.
So I mean, the Chadwick Boseman T'Challa Star-Lord, that storyline, I really liked it. I thought it was really cool. I thought they did it really well. It was well written. they threw in like Thanos and all this other stuff, which was
That was
really
funny.
That was
were
fun.
really entertaining. And something interesting that I was talking to my wife about that episode. It was really cool to see that like T'Challa's like presence is still felt, even though he didn't become the King of Wakanda,
Yeah,
and he became Star-Lord. And you see that in like how everyone reacts to him,
yeah,
right? Like he still has that like presence to him of like, oh, this guy's important. He knows what he's
yeah,
talking. He's a good person,
yeah,
and how like all that plays out. But
yeah,
it's also interesting how like at the end, but I think it's been at the end of pretty much every episode. It's almost a, like to be continued for their stories. And at the end of this one, you see Ego come back and talk to Peter Quill, and obviously his plan is actually gonna go through and happen. So I don't know if they're planning on like the second season to just kind of build off of these stories even more. But I just I have no idea where this is going,
yeah. Same.
which is kind of what makes it less like important for me to watch. It like these episodes, unlike Loki, even unlike WandaVision or like the Falcon Winter Soldier, where it's like, oh, I need to watch this episode this weekend. They just came out. These are kind of like, oh, a new episode
When I
came
get
out.
around to it.
Yeah, I'll get to it eventually. Like this is one of those series that I feel could have come out with the whole season all at once, and you wouldn't have missed anything
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
far, at least.
I think
yeah,
what's hurting it for me, and this is just my opinion, of the 3 episodes that have been released, I think the first episode has been the best one. Like that's been
Yeah,
the peak of it. To me, that the first episode has been the peak so far. It's the one that I felt was the strongest storytelling and the strongest storyline. So I don't know where it's going if I don't. I mean, to me, the following 2 episodes haven't really lived up to it,
yeah.
in my opinion.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was the thing I had wondered about it too, was how much of an impact is it going to have on the MCU as a whole? Is it just going to be an episode where we see, oh, in this world, Captain Carter, she becomes Captain Carter, Peggy becomes Captain Carter, is the one who gets the super soldier
Yeah.
serum,
And
and then it's like, okay, so we've seen that episode, is what's going to happen next? It just feels, I think my only criticism of that fact was it didn't feel like there was any state. It just felt like it was just going to be an offshoot. Oh, this is what happens in this world.
I
So it
mean,
just kind of, it's hard to really integrate yourself with that story because you just don't feel like there's going to be any kind of ramifications, or there's not really a story to be invested in because it's just going to end there, and that's going to be
I'm
the final say in it.
See, the thing is, that's a criticism of it, but at the same time, I don't want to like slag it too much. I'm not on that and its connections to the MCU, because I think a good show should be able to stand on its own, even if you don't like. And
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that's disappointing. Is like, yeah, we don't know the level of which it is going to affect the universe. I still feel like if these are just going to be self-contained stories, they could still be a lot stronger and more impactful if you know that they're not going anywhere beyond the series. Like really try to concentrate on giving them a little bit more punch. So I'm okay with the self-contained thing, but I think what hurts this is that it's self-contained and it's still trying to connect itself to the MCU at the same time. It's just like, you got to pick a lane. You're going to be a self-contained story or you're connected to this. It's kind of like stuck in the middle where it's not sure where it's going to be.
It's super apparent in the latest episode too.
Yeah.
Where it plays through like so many different movies of like the earlier MCU movies, and it's going through all of them, but all of a sudden you just start having everyone killed off, right?
Yeah.
You get all the original members killed off, and it's just kind of like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But yeah, and watching that is just kind of like, oh, that's weird. But you have to know the original movies in order to really understand what's happening there. I don't think it would really stand on its own as a story. Like if I showed it to someone that hadn't seen that before.
And I think that's flawed because it's trying to stand a little bit more on its own from the MCU while still trying to like feed off of all of its connections to the MCU. Like part of it, but not really. Like it's I don't know. It's kind of hard to get invested with that kind of approach.
Yeah, I think that's just from that storytelling perspective. It can kind of just go anywhere, which is something that could be an advantage, but it can also hurt them at the same time because then the audience doesn't know what to expect next.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for them to actually make it more standalone and almost its own, like, I don't want to say its own universe, but its own stories, self-contained stories, because that's how the What If series comic books worked. It was like little minor things that would change, like the Spider-Man what if Uncle Ben never died, and then you go on into this full trajectory, and it's an entirely different story that's not relying on the other Spider-Man comics. And that's why it was one of the more successful what if stories that actually got like a whole like vindicated series. And so and then there's plenty of other what if stories that did really well, but it's because they get the writer, they get their illustrator, and they're just like, all right, instead of, what was it, like Iron Man 2020 when that came out, like instead of Tony Stark becoming Iron Man, we're gonna have his brother become Iron Man instead. And it was a whole different story that became this whole thing that people fell in love with, the Iron Man with the huge gears on his shoulders and all this. So it became a self-contained story that people fell in love with. So I think that's, if they're really going to be taking like the what if name and building on that, they really need to work on creating their own stories that aren't too focused or too reliant on the established MCU as a whole, if they're not going to connect it, of course.
And that there you go, Eric. And that's the problem, is it's trying too hard to stand alone, but not letting go of its connections to everything else. I'm like, you gotta be lame with this one.
You gotta pick one.
But I mean, I'm still gonna keep up with it. We'll see where it goes. But it's one of my least favorite things that Marvel has probably put out in a good while.
Yeah.
Right. But What If has 3 episodes and every Wednesday, so make sure you guys check it out, form an opinion. If you guys are wrong and think it's the greatest thing, I mean, if you guys think that we're wrong and you think it's the greatest thing that Marvel has done, make sure you let us know in the comments. And last but not least,
is that an opinion? I need to know. Are there Marvel?
I'm sure someone has this opinion somewhere. I mean,
okay, there's somebody out there. Okay,
someone's always at the far end thinking something like this, I'm sure. And last but not least, Titans has just released episode 5, and it's kind of interesting seeing that. We're gonna break this down when the series wraps up in October, but it's kind of interesting that they're getting into this because they're kind of changing around the Red Hood arc, but at the same time, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, I just feel like the pacing is a little bit off. Things happen too quickly, and finally we actually get this is the very first episode where we have Bruce and Jason actually interact with each other. They've never interacted with each other anytime before, even though Jason appeared ever since the first season. So it's kind of interesting on that aspect. But we're gonna talk about that in the future. Make sure you guys check out Titans season 3 on HBO Max, and we're gonna cover that sometime later in the future when that wraps up. So main topic we wanted to get into, we ran a poll on which Hulk you guys liked better, the whole Ruffalo versus Norton debate, and it was actually pretty close. Ruffalo won 57% to Norton's 43%. So I just I thought that it was an interesting debate because not a lot of people were very aware that the first Incredible Hulk movie is technically canon, is supposed to be, even though they don't cover any kind of events and a lot of the ramifications don't have any merit aside from General Ross appearing in later seasons, in like Civil War and then Black Widow. But kind of interesting, and I want to it's been 13 years since that came out.
It was the first follow-up to Iron Man. People forget it very early on. It was
not a lot of people really remember that, but
I just want to get into the debate. Came out the same summer as The Dark Knight and Iron Man.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to get in that debate. Ruffalo versus Norton on a Hulk aspect. Which do you like better? And let's start with Eric because he's the aforementioned expert on the Hulk. He's got him right there on his desk.
Right here. Indestructible Hulk. My favorite series.
So what do you think, man?
Well, okay. So I think Ruffalo does a good job, but ultimately I'm going to go with Edward Norton. Just because I think he, especially in just the one movie he was in, he did a really good job at showing the like inner fight that he has with himself, with with always trying to like keep the Hulk out, but still always being like on the edge of turning into the Hulk. And I think he's able to solve a lot just as Bruce Banner. And you do see Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner do that, but I think Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner is more of he's just like a nerd. He's just smart and he knows stuff and he's able to talk to people. Whereas Ed Norton's Bruce Banner actually shows more like initiative and I need to get this done before the Hulk comes out and does it for me. And I think that's very reminiscent of the stories because, and especially in this one, Indestructible Hulk, Bruce Banner is just as important as the Hulk. And in that he has like all this like dirt on Shield, and he like Maria Hill's like bending to his will, and it's all Bruce Banner. Like he's figuring out how to get the stuff that he needs to get done in order to destroy like the big bads in this story. And he even goes to the point of like whenever he needs to fight against like Iron Man, which he does in the story, he's like, okay, all right, I'll let Hulk deal with that. And Hulk is more of like a weapon in his arsenal that Bruce Banner just lets go and it's like, all right, Hulk can take care of that. And that's why I think Edward Norton kind of digs into that a little more. And in previous interviews with Ed Norton, he's a fan of the comic books. So I think he was able to figure that out where Bruce Banner, especially in the later years, earlier on, it was more of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type thing where it just happened and then there was chaos. And Hulk was more of like a Godzilla, for example, where he's just this big guy who's going to attack other big monsters. That's just what he was going to do. Whereas I think Ed Norton kind of showed that the Hulk, yes, it's a curse, but at the same time, it can be used in a positive way. And he kind of he does a good job in his acting of showing that he's on a tightrope that entire time. But in the end, I don't know if you've seen the interview where they asked Edward Norton about Mark Ruffalo, and he's really good friends with Mark. And he's actually directed movies that Mark Ruffalo has been in. And he says himself, like, I couldn't have picked anyone better to replace me as the Hulk. So, or they couldn't have picked anyone better to replace him as the Hulk. So, obviously, it's Mark Ruffalo does a great job. He does a really good job at it. I think it's just more for like nostalgia that I'm drawn to Ed Norton just because he was the first Hulk that I saw that I was like, okay, that's Bruce Banner. That's a really good Bruce Banner, and I really like that take. So that's why I went towards Ed Norton.
How you, Jimmy?
I actually prefer Norton a little bit too, only because he seems a little bit more not that Mark Ruffalo's doesn't seem intelligent. I think that Mark Ruffalo's version gets a lot more love than Edward Norton's because there's something about him that feels more audience friendly or inviting or warm. I don't know if I'm making sense, but there's something a little bit more inviting about him. But I actually prefer Edward Norton's take on the character a little bit more. I think it's a little bit more figured out. I think it's a little bit more complex. And I think he strikes me as much more intelligent and in control than Mark Ruffalo's does.
Yeah. It's interesting
because I actually really like Mark Ruffalo's character. I think he's very likable. I think he's probably one of the most likable characters in the MCU. But he doesn't feel as substantial of a Bruce Banner as Edward Norton did. I think Edward Norton took the role a little bit more, maybe a little too seriously, because from what I understand, he had to leave because he wanted more input on the scripts as a fan. He was trying to like input, and I don't think Disney or
the editing process too. He tried to jump into also.
But yeah. So
no, I think that's. I would say it's really interesting. The same Ruffalo seems more likable because thinking about it now, I'm just rewatching Infinity War and Endgame with my son, and I don't know if Edward Norton would have been able to pull off the same Hulk as we saw in Endgame because he's very likable and he's funny and he's almost like clumsy at times when he's trying to create the time machine.
Hulk
and it's funny, right?
I can't picture, to be honest, Edward Norton is the kind of serious actor where I would picture him arguing with the director or getting mad at the Russos or bulking at them to ask to be like to do that. Like I like the way that Edward Norton isn't as an actor. I can picture it would have been a lot. I think he would have flat out refused to have done the Hulk like that.
Or even in Ragnarok. Like in Ragnarok, when you see just Bruce Banner, he's still comedic relief, right? It's just like it's just funny that how out of place he seems, and he doesn't even seem that I don't want to say he doesn't seem that smart, but he's not really tapping into his intelligence in that movie, right?
Not really.
He's just around because he's the Hulk, and I don't know if I could see Edward Norton do that.
Yeah. Because
No.
for me, growing up, it's an easy answer for me. It's obviously going to be Norton. I think there's a lot of bias in there just because Edward Norton is one of my favorite actors, and everything, all the movies I'd seen from him in the 90s just gravitated towards me saying, hey, this guy is a really great actor. So when it was announced he was going to be
History X.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when it was announced that he was going to be the Hulk, I was like, oh, that's perfect. And then him talking more about actually being a fan of the comics and then using the Incredible Hulk TV series as inspiration. Also, I think Bill Bixby, is that his name, the actor who played Bruce Banner?
I think so.
Using that as inspiration. And I just felt like it was just more fitting of a classic Hulk story, or the Hulk and the Bruce Banner dilemma that I knew and that I thought was, I won't say more interesting, but I just felt was more fitting for the character, with that whole great inner turmoil and all of the negative repercussions that come from turning into a raging freaking monster and not being able to be close to anybody. And you kind of saw that at times with Ruffalo, more so when with that whole weird relationship that they tried to force on him and Black Widow. He'd be like, I can't have any of this. I can't have this or that. I can't have a house. I can't have kids because of who I am. And I think that was the only time they really dived into that aspect that I wish was fleshed out a little bit more, because that's a central component of that character and one of the central dilemmas that he's facing. And I just felt like they went that completely different direction, making it more comedic, making it more jokey, making it more clumsy, because that just fit the MCU brand. And this is exactly why it was a good point that what Jimmy brought up, that he's just more likable in an audience perspective. And I think that's why it fits over to, or it delves over into whether people like him more or do they like Norton.
I mean, thinking about it, I kind of have weird feelings about it now that we're discussing it. I have a lot more ideas stewing in my head about this. You mentioned, Eric, that you don't think like Edward Norton would be able to like be the kind of comic relief that
I mean,
that
I've seen him in like funny movies. But it
almost seems like they knew that they weren't going to be making a lot of Hulk movies, so they relegated him to a sideline character. Like it's like a supporting character Hulk that we have in the MCU for the most part. It's not the type of Hulk that would dominate his own storylines. As an actor, the way that Edward Norton is and the way that especially the way that he talks about that comic book, I don't think he could have ever have stood for like having the Hulk turn into which is not saying that it's a bad portrayal. I like it. But I just can't picture, like you said, Edward Norton allowing it to turn into like a side comic relief character, almost like they knew that he was going to be used in a more frivolous manner. So they kind of demoted him within the Avengers a little bit.
Well, also, they don't have the rights to the character either. So I think that also complicates issues further. Matters.
Yeah, it just kind of sucks.
Yeah, I think I guess I might change my answer a little then, because I think for a comic book accurate Bruce Banner, Edward Norton did the best job on a live action movie. But for what the MCU needs and for what their vision was, I think Mark Ruffalo is a great fit.
Yeah,
and I don't think Edward Norton would have been able to fill that space.
I don't either.
Yeah,
he would have been out with the studios the entire time.
Yeah,
but honestly, that's still my favorite version of the Hulk is from the Incredible Hulk. And I think it's kind of funny because people seem to rank that as a lower tier MCU movie, or
I don't know why.
One. And I'm like, this is actually really good. It's 13 years dated. The CG is a little wonky at times, but as far as the Hulk and how he's presented and that beginning sequence where we see him in that factory in Brazil, that's straight out of a freaking horror movie. And that's freaking awesome.
I mean, I think it's just because it came out at the wrong time. It's not that it's one of the lesser ones. It just does not have the pop culture impact of something like Iron Man or any of the Captain America movies or the Avenger movies, the way that they were like, or even Guardians of the Galaxy, where they became the thing to talk about in pop culture at the moment.
Yeah.
I think that it just got overshadowed inside of superhero pop culture by Iron Man and The Dark Knight, which are like two movies that completely changed superhero films going forward. That's like a big marker in film history. And I think when you're competing with those two films in the same summer, your cultural impact is not going to be as much. And I think people remember it more culturally not making an impact. And when people rank it lower, I don't think they're actually really thinking about the movie and actually going back and examining it as a film. They just think about, oh yeah, it's that forgettable Hulk movie that came out that nobody really watched. I think that's why it gets demoted to it. Not because of its quality. It never made much of an impact on culture.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think one of the unsung heroes of that movie is also Tim Roth as Abomination.
Oh, he was awesome.
I mean, he's one of my favorite actors too, and he did a great job as Abomination. And I think it's really cool that is reported that Abomination is going to come out in Shang-Chi, right? In next month.
He's going to be Shang-Chi, but also in She-Hulk. I think he's actually going to be reprising his role.
Yeah, so exactly. So I'm excited about that they're actually like bringing more of these characters. Obviously, we've seen Thunderbolt Ross come through, but I want to see more of the original movie, the first Hulk movie. More of those actors come through because I think it's that important. I honestly liked it that much.
Yeah, definitely. So it's interesting to talk about this because like I haven't talked about this in a long time, and I just sit there and wonder like how do you guys think the MCU, how different would it have looked if they decided to bring Norton back and if Norton agreed to reprise his role? How different do you think the landscape of things would have been for the Hulk?
I mean, Norton wanted to go with darker Hulk movies, from what I understand. He wanted to go something a little more serious. And not that a lot of the MCU movies aren't serious, but there's like a lot of quipping at like dangerous times. Like, and you know what I'm talking about if you've seen Civil War.
We talk about that all the time.
Yeah, Civil War is the worst culprit of it all. But I just the way that Edward Norton is, if he would have stayed, the only way he would have stayed is with more control. And his Hulk movies would have been the most serious, darkest things in the MCU.
Yeah. I think it could have worked for Avengers, the first Avengers, just because Banner butts heads with Tony Stark all the time in the comic books. I think it could have worked with that movie. I think Hulk could have worked with the other Avenger movies as well. I just don't see how it would have worked with Thor, with Ragnarok. I just don't see how Hulk would have worked into that movie at all.
Edward Norton's version of Hulk would seem so out of place in a movie like Thor Ragnarok. It just seems like universe.
You would have just started fighting everybty,
right? Yeah. In the first Avengers, in Avengers: Age of Ultron, I could see his Hulk. I could see his Bruce Banner being in there, and especially with Age of Ultron, with him and Tony Stark creating Ultron and all that, I could see that working out. But again, when it comes to Ragnarok, when it comes to Endgame, so not Infinity War. Even in Infinity War, maybe like him struggling to get out the Hulk would have been interesting to see as Ed Norton. But in the end, again, the last those two Avenger movies, Infinity War and Endgame, it was meant for Mark Ruffalo, and I think a lot of it was written for that actor to play kind of what Jimmy was saying, more of the nicer, family friendly Bruce Banner.
Yeah. The one that could talk to kids and Hulk out and pose in pictures.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like that.
Well, he considers this a win, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I have another question to ask you. What do you think a Mark Ruffalo Hulk movie would be like in comparison to an Edward Norton Hulk movie?
I mean, Mark Ruffalo is an amazing actor. Like he's like one of my favorite movies with him in his Spotlight, and he plays such a serious role in that movie, and where he's playing as a reporter or a journalist. And I think it's really, I think he would do good in a standalone movie, but I would want to see a darker side. Like if they do the current run, the Immortal Hulk run right now is the craziest Hulk we've ever seen in the comic books. Because like if you're talking about Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, that Hulk is evil, and he's like if Punisher were the Hulk, that's who that Hulk is right now. And Bruce Banner is legit trying to kill the Hulk right now in that series, and it's just the fight between himself. and I think that is really cool. And I think seeing that in a movie, I do think Mark Ruffalo can pull it off as an actor. I
Yeah.
think right now, I don't know if it would be fitting of the character that the MCU has created right now, but at the same time, I think he could do a standalone movie, no problem. He's an amazing actor who can definitely captivate an audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like they're not going to want to go that route. The only instances we had of them was like in the first two, especially like that comment he had made in Age of Ultron. You're not going to have anything like that again. So I feel like they've kind of ridden themselves into a corner if they did want to pursue another Hulk movie. I don't think that they are, for one, because they don't have the rights. And that's going to just cause some issues and complications with Universal. And,
I mean, it hasn't stopped Spider-Man.
Well, I mean, that's
the thing. The thing
Spider-Man, though.
is also how badly the studios want it, because, like you said, it doesn't involve Spider-Man. I mean, not but the same thing could have happened with Spider-Man. But I don't know. I guess Spider-Man might be a bigger character culturally than the Hulk, which is kind of a big thing to say, because the Hulk is a big pop culture icon. But I feel like with the amount of money that they're spending in these movies, they probably think spending billions for Spider-Man is worth it. I don't know how if they feel the same way about the Hulk, because yes, the Hulk is a pop culture icon, but are Hulk movies really going to make as much as Spider-Man movies?
Yeah.
No.
I think if
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of rumors have been talking about us getting the Thunderbolts, right? And Thunderbolt Ross becoming the Red Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
I think once we have that established, we could definitely see something along the lines of the Hulk versus Red Hulk in the future.
That'd be awesome.
In one of those movies. And again, those comic book series are really good, really well written. And that was surprisingly not as dark as other Hulk stories have been. So I think that would be fitting in the MCU. And maybe once that is well established, maybe Universal would actually be looking at that closer to see, okay, now that there's clear adversaries to the Hulk, like the Red Hulk, you have Abomination already, and if they start bringing in more of the people he goes up against, and I mean, they can really do anything with his stories. Like, they have the time traveling Hulk too in the comic books, and he goes back and he's like fighting dragons and stuff alongside knights, and all those stories are really cool. Or they can just go again and then do him fighting with Thor, because he does that a lot in the comic books.
Oh yeah, he does.
So I think they have enough supporting characters around the Hulk now where he could have a standalone movie, and Universal might look at that and be like, okay, if we come to an agreement with Marvel or with Disney to have some of their characters come in. I think technically Thunderbolt is still owned by Universal. I mean, it came out in their movie first.
It should be.
So obviously they've been using Thunderbolt and we just saw him in Black Widow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they'll be able to come to an agreement if they really wanted to. Or I mean, right now it looks we haven't heard any rumors of them having any issues with the Hulk. Yeah. Unlike a few years ago, remember we started hearing stuff about Spider-Man and Sony not being happy with the agreement that was with Marvel, and there was a very real possibility that we weren't going to get any more Spider-Man movies in the MCU, and people were talking about that. But I haven't heard any rumors of the sort with Universal. I think they're very happy with their agreement right now. Yeah. And again, like you said, Hulk is one of those characters that we had one movie. I mean, we've had other movies outside of the MCU of the Hulk, and yeah, and we don't necessarily need to keep pushing that. And in Ragnarok, we got a little bit of Planet or World War Hulk. Mm-hmm. So I think just kind of sprinkling the Hulk stories into the bigger MCU stories right now, I think that's enough, and I think that's okay. And that's me being a Hulk fan. Mm-hmm. I think that's enough for me as a Hulk fan to be content with what they're doing with those stories, because I understand that a lot of the stories won't really work as live action in the same way that like World War Hulk, the animated movie, worked really well, and that was really cool to see. And maybe with Marvel Animation, we'll see more of those Hulk stories come out. But as of now for the MCU, I think it's doing really well, and it's okay with just moving along with how they are.
But to be honest, I don't see them doing another Hulk movie. It seems like they don't really have those intentions or those ideas or those plans. They're going to be pursuing a She-Hulk. It just doesn't seem like they're content. Like, it just seems like they're content with this character being a side character in in these films, or kind of just being someone who pops up in different.
I think it seems both Universal and Disney are content with where it's at now, because if Universal really wanted to get in on it, they would shove and push at Disney. They're not. I mean, I'm not saying that Universal is big as Disney, but that's a giant conglomeration. That's a huge corporation. They have power and they have billions of dollars in sway. If they really wanted to do a Hulk movie, they would be pushing more aggressively on Disney to collaborate with them. And if Disney really wanted it, they would be pushing more aggressively on Universal to collaborate with them the same way that they did with Sony. I don't see the desire on either studio to pursue that route at this point.
Yeah.
So as soon as one studio, either Universal or Disney, decides that they really want to pursue it, then we'll see more Hulk-centric stories. Until then, I don't think it's going to happen. It's just going to be that's up to the suits at those two companies right now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was saying, I don't think we're missing out either.
Okay. Yeah. So make sure you guys check out The Incredible Hulk from 2008.
Yep.
If you guys want to debate in this discussion further, let us know in the comments which actor you prefer, which version you prefer is better, Norton or Hulk. And moving on to our last topic of the day, we wanted to get into a bit more of a discussion and something I'm sure we're all going to have different opinions and views on this, but how do you guys feel that superheroes and pop culture has changed since we were kids?
I mean, I think superheroes have always been a big thing in pop culture. Like, they have always been a huge thing and a huge part of pop culture. I think that before it was more nerd culture and people liked it, but it was considered like a nerdy thing, but people still really liked it. I mean, obviously, movies like the old Batman and Superman movies were huge hits, but I think the way that it's different is that it was a big piece of pop culture before. Now it is the dominant thing in pop culture at the moment. Not just one big piece of it, but the dominant. Now we have people who never would have considered reading comic books, who never liked comic book characters, have now all of a sudden become big fans. And I don't say that in a bitter hipster kind of way. I actually think it's kind of cool. I'm not one of those people who gets mad at, the mass acceptance of superheroes characters now. So I think that's the biggest difference. It went from being just a huge piece of pop culture to being the thing in pop culture at the moment, where everybody loves superheroes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I'm agreeing with Jimmy here, but it's interesting how when we were younger, it was almost like people who read comic books were kind of like the nerdy ones.
Exactly.
At least myself, right? Like I had comic books, and I would read them. I would share them with my friends, and even some of my friends were like, nah, like we're not going to read those. And now, like I think, especially the movies like the Dark Knight trilogy, and then all these MCU movies that have been coming out have kind of made it more acceptable to kind of nerd out. But I think there's a very clear division between who read the comic books and who are only movie fans. And you can see that in conversations of, like, there's a local comic book store here, right? And I'll go to the comic book store, and my sister was even talking about this too. She went to her comic book store, and she like mentioned a specific thing from the comic books, and even the like person on the other side that's like the worker there will like start talking, and right away she could tell, oh, he only watched the movies, he doesn't read these comics. Like I like the storyline's different. And within pop culture, I think there's almost like some people might feel like the newer fans are like intruding into what their fandom was. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, they don't even really know the backstory of those characters. Like, they're just doing it just to do it, just because it's the cool thing, like wearing the shirts or like the Captain America shirts and all that. Or the like Wakanda. What was that?
No, keep going. Sorry, I thought you were done. Keep going.
I was gonna say, or like the Wakanda Forever stuff, right? and like people were just like going along with it, even though I doubt a lot of the people that watched the movie ever read any of those comic books, which were great and which were amazing and came out like shortly after like the civil rights movements, and they're really important for those movements. If you actually read those comic books, they're like way ahead of their time, and it was really like important cultural phenomenons that they were discussing. And so I think it's if you want to say you're part of the fandom, I think you really need to dive in and understand what that fandom is, rather than just say, or that I'm a fan of the movies and that's it. So I think there's I know it's almost, it sounds kind of dumb, but I think there's if you're gonna say you're a fan of the superheroes, I think you really need to kind of do your research and really know what that means.
So is it a problem then when someone says that, like, oh, I only watch Iron Man. I only watch Iron Man because of Robert Downey Jr. I don't read comics. Is
Yeah.
that something that's an issue for you? Like they're admitting it. They're like, oh, I'm not going to read comics, but I do like this
Yeah.
character. I like everything he stands for. I like the version they've done in the MCU. Is that something you find
Yeah.
an issue with?
I don't think it's an issue. I think it's an issue when you say, oh yeah, I'm a huge Captain America fan, but you don't know any of the actual story. Right? Like you don't understand how Captain America was used blatantly for World War II propaganda before.
Punching out Hitler.
Yeah, right. And I remember one of my friends even hit me up because she actually started reading some of the comic books, and she's like, "What is this shit? Like, it's literally like blatantly just American propaganda, like the earlier comic books." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I was telling you,
Captain
like,
America. What do you?"
Yeah,
yeah.
It's like what you saw in Captain America, the first Avenger, and how he was like portrayed as trying to sell bonds. Like that was legit how they used the comic books in those times. And she was just blown away by it, right? And so I don't have a problem with people being just the movie fans, and I love discussing the movies with people. But at the same time, it's like sometimes you even have strictly MCU fans, like with Doc Ock coming out in Spider-Man trailer. And I'm like, oh, dude, that's a Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2. It's like, what are you talking about? It's just like Marvel is just the MCU. Like they just came out with this guy out of nowhere. They're like, there's legit people online that are thinking that way. Like, oh, okay, we got Doc Ock now. I was like, no, this is important because it's from this other movie. And so I think people just are kind of like going with the flow, and that's fine. And I think if you say you're a fan of the movies, I can have a discussion with you on that. But I think saying and pretending like you're a fan of the heroes and saying that you understand the heroes fully without actually diving deep into who those characters are and why they were created, I think that's a problem. I think one of my biggest superhero groups that I love is the X-Men, and it bothers me how many people don't understand that the X-Men were created to mirror the civil rights movement and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and all they see is action and they're fighting, and they don't see the deeper meaning in those heroes and who they are and why they're important.
Yeah.
So
I think that's where it gets me, right?
All right. So for the most part, I don't have a problem with it, just because I think entertainment is supposed to be fun. It's you're not supposed to be stressed out to be a fan of something. You know what I mean? So I don't have a problem with it. I also think a lot of these characters, what makes them so great and why they've lasted over the years and why they've lasted over decades is because they're very malleable. They can change to fit the moment. They could change to be what you need them to be at the moment. I know that the movies aren't 100% faithful to the comic books, but that's because it's a completely comic books and movies are in live, especially live action. Animation is a different story, but live action is such a different medium than what comic books are that I can understand the changes being made. And I also think that these characters are so cool and so awesome that not everybody is going to read comic books, and most people aren't. We need to just accept that and face that people should have other avenues to experience these stories and to experience these characters, whether it's the live action movies. I think the best place to go is probably DC's animated movies. Like those ones are, that's like perfect for people who want to get to know these characters a little bit more and want to have an understanding of them without reading the comic books. I think a lot of those animated films will get you a long way towards that, and I don't have a problem with it because I don't like the idea of like gatekeeping or like you're not a real fan. But yeah, it is, on the other hand, it is kind of annoying when people claim that they know things and it's clear that they don't, or people who've never read the comic books trying to complain about this isn't faithful or that's not faithful and that's not my version. I'm like, dude, you know one specific version of something that's adapted. And I think it becomes a problem with stuff like the X-Men when people forget to get the meaning over it, when people start complaining about all this subtext and the ideas in it. Just tell a good story. It doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be about civil rights and all that things. I'm like, dude, that goes way back to the comic book. So if you don't even understand the idea, then you don't get the X-Men concept at all. If you don't get that it's largely about civil rights and it's largely a social commentary, and that Professor X and Magneto are basically Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. So I guess it's fine for the most part, as long as you don't base everything you know about a superhero based on the specific movie you saw and then expecting everything to conform to that movie. Another great example of it is a couple of people I talked to, is older people, so it makes sense, when they were trying to debate me about the Dark Knight Batman Begins and the Dark Knight Rises, is how unfaithful they are compared to Tim Burton's ones. And I'm like, yeah, Tim Burton's Batman, the first one, is more faithful to Batman in certain respects, in like more comic booky aspects, like, you know, the Joker falling into a vat of acid, the Batplane and the Batmobile actually looking like a Batplane and Batmobile. But there are other aspects where it's very obvious that Christopher Nolan has delved more extensively into the comic books than Tim Burton ever did, which is, like, I think it's an easy thing to say. So it kind of gets more annoying when people try to claim that this is what it is and it's wrong. I'm like, well, how do you know? Have you actually ever delved? Have you read The Long Halloween? Have you read this comic book to know that Christopher Nolan, maybe he's not 100% faithful because he's twisting that world to make it his own vision, kind of make it more realistic. And it's not 100% like the comics, but if you've read the comics, it's very obvious these are made by people who are into the comic book lore and really studied it. So it's fine, because I think everybody should enjoy them. It just gets annoying when people act like the movie that they saw is the definitive version of that character. That's where it gets annoying to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think you put it in better words what I was saying. I think I was coming off a bit pretentious there, but yeah, I don't want to be a gatekeeper, and then that's for sure. And I understand that for a lot of people it's just going to be the movies or the TV shows, and that's what they're going to know as the hero. And I honestly, I think I'd rather have it that way. I'd rather have more people become fans of the superheroes through movies and not read the comic books, than us not have those avenues at all. And just because, I mean, I'm in San Diego, obviously San Diego Comic-Con is a big deal, and just seeing so many people come together, all the cosplay, everyone just being fans, even though, like, you know, most of the people there are not gonna be like super nerdy, know all the, like, be a freaking Marvel and DC encyclopedia, but at the same time, you know, they're just fans. And I think I see that more and more, and just being able to now at this moment be able to talk about how cool Captain America is just randomly. Like the other day, I was at the hospital with my wife when she was born. I went out to go get lunch, and I had a Captain America shirt. And just a random dude across the park, he was like, "Hey, Captain America!" I was like, "Yeah," and that was it. And it's just like you connect on a very superficial level sometimes, but I think that's good enough. I think that's really cool, and I'm happy to be able to experience that within my lifetime. It's not just something that's relegated to nerds, to nerddom, right? It's something that has now come into the pop culture. It's a mainstay in pop culture. I think it's going to be here for a while, and I'm really excited about that.
And since not everybody reads comic books, it gives us a better and easier avenue to share your passion with other people. Like, oh, dude, you don't read comics, I got to show you this movie.
Exactly.
It's awesome. Like, so, or an animated version or a TV show or anything like that. So I think that there's more than one way to be a fan. Just don't pretend that the one version that you watched is somehow the definitive version, because that's the one that you saw at the right age, or that's the one that resonates with you. So I guess it just depends on how you look at it. But ultimately, I think it's kind of cool, because let's be honest, if you really want these characters to last and have like more resonance in pop culture, they're going to have to start being adapted into films and television series and animated shows and animated movies. And that's what's going to keep them alive. And that's what's going to keep the general public talking about them, not just hardcore fans.
Yeah. And I think that's the interesting thing too, because that's something that is also remarkably different, is that there's a lot of care and sensitivity when crafting these characters, creating these characters, writing these characters. And finding the right casting choice for these characters in terms of movies and shows, live action portrayals. I think that has gotten a lot better. I don't think we're ever going to see another Topher Grace as Eddie Brock or any kind of casting choice where it's just completely freaking baffling. And I think they're doing a better job with casting, and like they're truly trying to, I won't say appease only comic book fans, but get at least somewhat of the iconic image that they're going for, or an actor who can bring out that right personality.
Okay, in all fairness, you're going on another route with that. When you mentioned like the Topher Grace Eddie Brock thing, like we're not going to get casting like that. In all fairness, this is an example of why there's different types of fandoms. Sam Raimi is a big Spider-Man fan, and he grew up reading the comics, and he loves the classic Spider-Man. He did not want to do Venom, largely because he was not familiar with Venom. He's not a fan of those comic books, and it's not a villain that he knew very well. That was like the studio forcing it in. That's an example of a fan not doing necessarily a good Venom because that's not necessarily what he's a fan of in Spider-Man comics.
Yeah.
I don't think
well, I mean, it's not his fault. I'm just saying, as far as that's just the one casting choice. I'm just like, who the heck thought this was a great idea? I definitely feel what Eric was saying in the beginning about people becoming more attached to the stories and diving more into the source material. Like I said, there were so many instances where a lot of my friends have been like, hey, I want to read more on Captain America. Oh, I want to read more on Daredevil. Oh, I want to read more on Spider-Man. What storyline do you recommend, or what should I read? And I think that's an interesting part of this whole thing, because you start getting especially when a lot of these are moving into franchises and sequels and building expanded universes. So obviously you're going to see so many different portrayals. Well, not so many different portrayals, but the same portrayal of that character. And I think it causes people to become so attached to it that they start saying, hey, this character is really cool. Or, hey, I'm actually really starting to like this character. So it causes them to dive deeper into the source material or start reading up stories because they were so inspired by what they had seen that it led them to reach out and branch out and read other stories and see if there's any other different kind of takes. And I think that aspect is really cool, because that's honestly how I got into comics. I was not somebody who read comics at an early age. And even then too, I think that you were allowed to like superheroes. You were always talking with your friends about, oh, Spider-Man 2002 came out, or, oh, X-Men 2 came out, and you were talking with all your friends who was your favorite one and what happened, how cool it was. But you never brought up, oh, I read The Killing Joke. Oh, I read The Long Halloween. Oh, I'm reading the current edition of Superman or whatever. You didn't do that because you just didn't want to get classified as a nerd. And I think that's a little bit ironic that you were allowed to like superheroes, but you weren't really allowed to read those stories or talk about the comics, or not exactly that you weren't allowed to, but that you would be looked at as a nerd. But you weren't looked at as a nerd if you were talking about the movie or talking about the latest show that came out. And that aspect is definitely very interesting. Now we're getting into it to where your people are able to just have those kind of bonds and those kind of relationships over comics, over a shared love for it. And there's not that social stigma attached with being a nerd, or being a nerd is seen as more as a positive thing. And I think that part is probably one of the coolest things that have developed over the last like 10 years. What do you guys think about that?
I think nerds are cooler in pop culture. I don't think they have the same stance. They don't have the same place in pop culture that they did 20 years ago. Now people consult with nerds when they want to know something, and they find things out where where nerds are kind of cool. And here's another thing I remember when I was a kid, when the Spider-Man and the X-Men movies were coming out, like you said, it was like a cool thing to like talk about the movies, but not necessarily the comic books. And that is true. But I also do remember some kids started reading more of the comic books because of those movies. I specifically remember there was like when that Spider-Man movie came out, all of a sudden a group of kids who would have never considered comic books were reading the Ultimate Spider-Man. So it does lead people back to the comic books. Maybe not everybody, but it does grow the comic book audience a lot, I think.
Yeah. I think my biggest thing I've learned, and something that has been cool, and the main thing that we're talking about, is pop culture inspires source material, or inspires people to read up on the source material.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, you can see that right now with the Spider-Man trailer, right? With Spider-Man going to Doctor Strange, it's been reported that that's what was it, the One More Day storyline with Spider-Man?
mhm.
And
Isn't
a
it like
lot of
one more day or one final day or something?
yeah, I forgot what that one the story
Yeah.
was. I think it's like a 5-issue story. Um, it's sold out in a lot of comic book stores already because the trailer came out.
Hmm.
Because people want to read it. People are gravitating towards it. Same thing with Civil War. When Captain America Civil War came out, um, it it was really hard to find that series in comic book stores because people were buying them because they wanted to read up on the source material ahead of it. So I think it makes a lot of sense that, especially if someone comes up to you and says, like they want to know more about, I don't know, something like Superman, right? I can give them a comic book, but at the same time, I can also show them. We just talked about it, All Star Superman. I can say, oh, there's also this animated movie if you want to check that out too, so you can get a good, well-rounded idea of who Superman is, and then we can find some comics for you to read. And yeah, it's almost like it's an easier way in for a lot of people that are familiar with that media already, right? They already know movies and TV shows, so maybe that'll be my foot in the door, and now I can start delving into the comic books and get an idea of what I like and what I might not.
Exactly.
And when Marvel steps their animation game up, then it'll be even easier to introduce people into more, because in my experience, I mean, I'm sure you guys agree with this, is that animated adaptations are always more faithful than live action adaptations of comic book stories, just because it's easier to be faithful to comic book stories when you're using a medium that's a little bit closer to what the original is. So as soon as Marvel, which like we talked about it on the podcast, they're going to be opening up, right, Nick? They're opening up like their own studio.
Yeah, Marvel
Marvel
Studios is
Animation.
opening a Marvel Animation department.
Yeah. And that'll lead people, fans who like the MCU movies, who still aren't sold on like really delving into the comic books, will give them a different avenue of stories that will still give them very faithful interpretation and adaptions of these characters in a way that will make it like that if you see a bunch of these, you'll get a big understanding. Because I'm firmly convinced that, like, all right, say you love Batman, but you've never read any of the comic books. If you watch all the animated series and at least watch 10 to 15 of the movies, you'll know a lot about the mythology. Ever having read any of the comics, you'll know so much about it. So as soon as like Marvel gets like more on that, there's gonna be a lot of different routes to point people to who don't want to read comics, who still want to get a very faithful version of those characters.
It's not something I think you can really harshly criticize or judge someone who's saying, oh, this person's a normie, oh, this person's not a real fan, because it takes a lot of effort to read a comic or a graphic novel, especially when you're talking something like Watchmen. What is a Watchmen, like 300, 400 pages, whatever it is?
That thing is
so there's going to be, I think, for those ones
to read. Watchmen is not a brief read either. I know people are like, oh, it's a comic book, it's pictures, they're brief. I'm like,
it's a real novel.
Even All-Star Superman, I lent it to two friends. My first friend I lent it to, he read it in a weekend, which also Superman is like 280 pages, whatever it is. And my other friend, I lent it to him right after. I'm like, okay, cool. 2 weeks, I'll get it back. It's been like over a month, and I don't even think my friend has even started it. So it takes a lot of effort and a lot to really get through a comic. You need to actually devote time, devote attention, and actually understand, because you don't want to just read it. You want to make sure you're fully invested and that you're going to be able to actually digest everything that's going on and be able to remember it and articulate it if you need to, because you don't want to just read and then be like scamming through or speed reading, or that obviously doesn't work. So I don't really fault anybody if they say they don't read comics. I'm really impressed, and I really appreciate those that actually asking me for advice. Oh, hey, like, what do you recommend as far as reading? I like this character, what story do you recommend? But at the same time, I understand that not everyone is going to go that route, because it just takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort. So like I had said too, with that too, especially you're a Batman fan, hey, you don't want to read comics, go ahead and just watch Batman the Animated Series, watch Batman Beyond, watch Justice League,
watch Under the Red Hood.
Phantasm. You're going to truly understand everything you need to know about that character,
and
a lot of great stories, and especially a lot of stuff that was inspired by the source material in Batman the Animated Series alone.
Yeah.
And the Arkham video games. That's going to be a more interactive
Gaming,
experience.
Yeah,
that
that's
was
another.
also
That's
inspired by the
see,
comics.
and there you go. Video games. That's another avenue. That's another medium
Yeah.
that allows people to get familiar with it. Because even though I don't play video games, I did play the Arkham Batman games, and I feel like if you're not like that into Batman, once you've played that game, you will have learned a lot about the Batman
Oh, yeah.
universe and the villains and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
like I said, I think it's cool that other mediums are able to explore the comic book mythology almost the same extent as comic books do.
Well, that being said, thank you guys for joining us on today's episode. That's all the time we have for today. Make sure you guys follow us on IG at Heroes and Mutants Podcast. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends, and keep posted for more superhero content coming to you very shortly. Thank you guys so much.